that's here today. Just have to invite Mr. Delehanty more often. So I'm going to let him jump right in. I do want to introduce him in case you haven't had a chance to meet Chris before or be at our meetings, excuse me. Chris is our Executive Director of Capital Programs and Technology. Okay, he's going to be talking today and giving us facility updates and getting some input from you this morning. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for being here first thing in the morning. I am here today to talk about our modernization and modernization plans. And right now we're going across the district, and as we first passed our Measure MM bond, we worked on some priorities, and we have some priorities that the board set forth at the beginning. And then we are coming back out, and we had some conversations and some brainstorming sessions very early on about some of the small amounts of money that we might be able to do, the small projects we might be able to do. And now we're coming back to have some conversation with each school site and get input, share about what's planned for the modernization at your school sites, get input from you because as I'll show, we have our FMP and we have the money that we cost. We have the money that we have from the bond, and we've prioritized certain projects, and so we'll be able to talk about the timeline for those. And then the goal is to get your input on these are the prioritized areas. Are there things that you see that are missing? Are there things that you believe are a higher priority? I have Kathy Bryces, who's the office manager for our tech department over here, and Kathy will be able to take notes. Rather than scribing it and then having to type it in, it seemed like it made more sense for her to just type it in and we'd be able to have those notes. And then I'll share a little bit at the end, but by going out to all 7 sites and getting input on the priorities we have and getting input on the modernization we're looking at in each school site, we then will be convening a facilities roundtable with representatives from every school site, be able to look at it site-based, district-wide, and go back to site-based and really kind of continue with the process of working with the community, because we know that we have about a 10-year facilities program based on this bond, and so there will be things that happen over that period and updates that need to be made, and we want to continue to work with you as the community on that. So we will go over a brief review, overview of the Measure MM and the process we had in developing that. I'll talk about, again, our district-wide facilities plan, and then we'll go specifically to Delmar Hills and what is right now earmarked in the planning for modernization over the course of the bond, and then, again, have some chance for you guys to provide some input. So, to briefly talk about the Measure MM, many of you probably know, but in July and August of 2018, the board took action to approve a facilities master plan and then to put Measure MM on the ballot. In 2018, in November, the community passed Measure MM with over 60% approval. When we look at that Measure MM and we look at the projects in there, the initial priorities that were presented and were shared were the Delmar Heights School rebuild, Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, and finding ways to impact all of our school sites. So with the 2 big builds, that obviously takes a fair amount of the initial bond funds. So the beginning of the bond, much of the proceeds must be spent on those 2 because they're large projects. So the anticipated completion for those 2 right now is for Delmar Heights to be completed in August of 2021 and Pacific Highlands Ranch to be completed prior to August but open in August of 2022. For all sites, we are looking at classroom upgrades. Immediately, we've done classroom upgrades over the course of summer 2019 and ongoing. We've done site-based improvements at sites. For example, we've done blacktop improvements at a number of our sites have done and are looking at. Termite tinting here in Carmel Del Mar School. We've done general painting and HVAC improvements that have been needed. We are planning for field improvements this summer and between this summer and next summer here at Delmar Hills and at Torrey Hills. That will be a full redo of the fields. We're doing the planning right now, and it will be either this summer or next summer for Delmar Hills. And then, again, the classrooms, we've done a number of items in the classrooms between casework and painting and upgrades, and then things with furniture and technology that may not be Measure MM necessarily, but are generally looking at what we're doing and focusing on and making improvements in the classroom. So when we look at just generally the facilities program, it is hard to lump it into just Measure MM because we do have some community facility districts or Mello-Roos districts in our district. And so when we look at the whole district, we try to look at what is the overall funding, because For example, Pacific Highlands Ranch, they're paying taxes that will pay into some of the build of that school, but there also are Measure M funds that will go into that. And so when we look at that generally overall, we have $186 million that was approved for Measure M. There are approximately $50 million in other funds that can go towards facilities. So I share that because it gives us just generally the overall amount of money that we have moving towards facilities over this next 10-year period. You can't read this, but I'm sharing it because this is where my next slide will come from. And if you look at our facilities master plan, there is a blue line that looks at 2018 dollars, and then there are two lines that look at if we escalate out to 2021 to 2024, and we know that our work will go out through about 2030 for this current Measure M. And when we escalate those out, from our facilities master plan, we show that at a 4% escalation, which is kind of an industry standard when you look at long-term escalation, we see higher escalation recently, but then you have years around 2008 where it was zero escalation and things were even. So we tried to do, when we're doing long-term planning, do something that's sort of an industry standard. When we do that, we see that our full FMP as of the 2024 from the FMP would be $272 million. So share that because our full funding is a little bit less than what we would be able to do with the full FMP. And that leads to the need to do some prioritization. So we've done some work with prioritization, and part of our big purpose here is to get input from the community. We will also be reaching out to our site staff and being able to get the input across the board to say, here's what we have looked at based on priorities set forth with our District Design 2022. What do you see, and you see things that are maybe missing? So identified priorities are obviously student safety, which is always a priority for the district. We've prioritized through our district design and through the planning we've been doing over the last number of years, impacting our classroom learning, classroom upgrades, our innovation centers. We've also looked at life cycle replacement. There are things that have to be replaced at our school sites. We know when we look at Delmar Hills, our roof is going to be in need of replacement fairly soon. We have HVAC systems here that we need replacing. There are plumbing and infrastructure systems. And then we looked at energy savings. So we have done an initial analysis of solar, and we were looking at how we could include solar. We've been doing energy efficiency through Prop 39 funding and using LED lighting, which has made a noticeable savings to our energy expenditures. And so looking at how we can be energy efficient, but then also how can we offset. I also shared that there are some district patterns in this for anybody who was involved in the conversations around the facility master plan. When we looked at our enrollment is fairly flat, although it is increasing in the very east side where we have the new development. It is gone down a little bit. Some of our other schools, we've seen Ocean Air decrease in enrollment, we've seen Sage Canyon decrease in enrollment. We have some that have stayed fairly even. But when we look at fairly flat district-wide and adding a school in 2022, we know that our general enrollment across the district in schools district-wide should not see a whole lot of increase. We will not likely see a school that has 800 students like we had at Ocean Air a few years ago. Because we now have 9 schools and our enrollment is flattening out around 4,200 students. So with that in mind, that has led to some of the prioritization. I'm going to share that prioritization in just a moment, but when we look at things, for example, like MUR expansion at some of our schools that were 750 students and are shrinking down, they may not need the same MUR expansion of a 750 student school if you're going to settle in at a 550 student school. So there's some of those things where we're looking at what is the right prioritization. And then that's where we are, again, asking for input from the community. So with that in mind, we set out a general plan for the expenditure of the funds through series. When you spend bond funds, we have $186 million that is authorized, but we can't bond or pull $186 million immediately for 2 reasons. One, we don't have the capacity to do that much construction at one time in our district. But 2, you have to be able to spend 3 reasons. 2, you have to be able to spend that money within approximately 3 years, most of that money. And then there's the overall bonding capacity. So the amount that can be taxed at one time is a certain level, and so you can't tax the community that much at one period of time. So with that in mind, our initial series that we have already pulled is $55 million. And then we have 3 more that we're anticipating. And I have the years, those kind of 3-year increments at the top. So in essence, we're going to have 4 series of bonds, each of them between $40 and $55 million. And that allows us to do a fair amount of work in those 3-year increments and that also means that we need to look at what is the work that we do in there. So this is going to share with you in Series A, in Series B, Series C, Series D, those 4 series, what work we are planning to do. So Series A we've already begun on. The Del Mar Heights School rebuild we're working on with the planning. We're working on planning with Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9. We've identified funding for immediate projects such as the blacktops and looking at fields and pieces like that would be immediate projects that we could fit in so that we can make an impact at each of our school sites. Series B, which would be, we are anticipating Series B being pulled in 2021. The asterisk should have a note under it that says that this is an anticipated date range. Each of the rest of them are anticipated because we haven't obviously pulled them yet. In Series B, we have our Del Mar Heights School rebuild and Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9 finishing off. So there'll be a little bit of funds from that will finish off those 2 projects. We also have our Del Mar Hills Academy modernization and our Carmel Del Mar modernization in Series B. In Series C, we are looking at solar installation, and we've done an analysis. We are most likely not doing a power purchase agreement. Power purchase agreement would be that we are entering into an agreement with another entity that would be putting the solar on. We are now looking at how we put the solar in and potentially at a more expedited pace than 2024, and looking at some of our schools that may be getting modernized, such as Del Mar Hills, and how do we sink some of that in. And some of our other schools that are in a range where roof repair would make sense because we could put it on the roof. So I have the, it's potentially in this group, it might not. So we're kind of still working that out with our analysis of solar. We do have a fair amount of money for each site for play improvements. We've been working on improved play structures, and we want to put play improvements into every school site to include play structures, to include the replacing the wood chips with a better fall zone area, to include potentially upgrades either with blacktop or field, depending on the school site. Ashley Falls will be modernized in 24 through 27, Series C. We would also have Sage Canyon and Torrey Hills, which would be getting their Classroom and Innovation Center. And then in Series D, Sage Canyon and Torrey Hills, we come back to the structural modernization. Part of the reason why we split some of these is Del Mar is kind of the bottom of the totem pole when we look at the opportunity to receive state funding. However, there are still opportunities to put ourselves in there and potentially receive some small amounts back. And so by splitting some of these, we can hit the 25-year range for modernization and at least qualify potentially. Whether we end up getting high enough to receive the funds, we want to make sure that we can qualify, because if we get that money back, we could put that towards facilities in the future. We do not anticipate getting it at the time that we do the modernization, but we are hopeful that if we go through the process, we are still setting ourselves up to potentially have monies that come back that we could use in future. And then we have Sycamore Ridge's full modernization and Ocean's Air School's full modernization. And then we've separated out, and we're still working through technology infrastructure can come in this last series because we have enough of a backbone. This is really the wiring infrastructure. The wiring infrastructure can support what we have now. We have an ongoing switch refresh and access point refresh so that you can continue to stay up to date. But there's some technology infrastructure that we put in this. There's also some front office upgrades that we have in this series, and we'll be revisiting if we can fit them into some of the modernizations. But some of them were a little bit more costly, and the prioritization was to impact the classroom first and the front office second. So you will note, if you are really conscious of the facilities master plan, that a couple of things that have been left off. I mentioned the MER expansion. Most portable to permanent replacements will not be needed. When we looked at talking about enrollment, back to enrollment, the idea of putting replacing a lot of our portables with permanent buildings that we had earlier on in our facility master plan iterations is probably not a need. Here at Del Mar Hills, there's maybe a need for about 2 classrooms. So we are looking at, when we review the classrooms available in the site and we review the overall layout and the projections, it seems like there may be a need for a couple of classrooms. So we're finalizing that piece of where we we'll need these based on enrollment projections. And enrollment projections are going to play in because some of the places that have portables, like Sage Canyon, are in Series C, which is 6 years from now. So this is where it's going to require us to continue to look at our enrollment projections, look at our planning, and look at, does enrollment continue flat? Does enrollment decline? That would impact. Does enrollment starts to creep up? And so those will be pieces why we will continue to have a facilities group at a district level and come back out to the sites. And then we have professional learning centers, and when we looked at it, our staff and our principals are able to have meetings in classrooms. When we have an open classroom, many times we'll have meetings in our innovation center MURs or using our innovation centers or our MURs. And so that was one that we pulled off of our prioritization as well. So specific to Del Mar Hills Academy, the site modernization will include classroom upgrades, furniture and technology, library innovation center. We've already done some work with that, but there will be some review in the design planning process. We have roofing, flooring, electrical, plumbing, that infrastructure piece that will be done. That, for construction costs, is about a little over $10 million. Del Mar Hills also has field updates, which we're planning for summer of 21 or summer of 22. We have solar, which again, it's either going to be in 2024 or we're going to be pulling some more money into the modernization to be able to include the solar in that roofing, which we are analyzing right now and would ideally be the next step that we do. Play structures, we have a fair amount of money to do play across the school site. Play structures, the ground covering, potentially needs with the blacktop, and then the technology infrastructure front office is the last piece. And so you can see we have identified funds for each of those. When you put those all together, we have a construction budget of almost $15 million here, and an overall project budget of almost $20 million for Del Mar Hills over the course of the life of the bond. And then I just want to end with, I spoke to it a little bit, but to detail sort of look at our community engagement and planning. Right now, I'm in the midst of the site planning meetings. The third school I've met with, I have a number of schools next week and a couple of schools right after parent-teacher conferences. By getting that, and Kathy being here, we're gathering input from each of the school sites. We'll then take that input, we'll look at it as staff, but we'll also be looking at it with a group which is a facilities roundtable. And so we've asked for input from our principals for 2 parent members, and we've reached out and we have scheduled a meeting for late April. And so that's at a point when then we'll bring back, looking at site-based, here's what we're saying, and here's what we see as priorities and what we need. And then looking at district-wide, having representation from each school site and talking about, are there needs for shifts in prioritization just at specific school sites, or are there overall shifts that we need to make and things that we need to be taking into account? So my goal is to be able to come to the community and get input, work with a district-wide group of representing each school site, have a combination of your representatives be able to come back and with Ms. Sleet and yourselves be able to get input and have that back and forth so that we're continuing to have the conversation about those priorities and about when we need to make change, what those changes are, and come back out and share and update as we continue. So this really is sort of a long-term process that we'll be seeing. We'll have a facilities roundtable, we'll have a facilities group, it's sort of a district representation, and then we'll be able to continue to get input from you as a community and kind of do that back and forth so that we're making really good decisions with the money we have to improve the facilities across the district. And with that, I take questions, input. I really would like to hear if there are things that we are not prioritizing here at Del Mar Hills or concerns about the modernization or things that you think are up there that are on that list but they are the really most important thing. This is where I'm hoping to get input from you and have Kathy gather that so that we can go back and continue to reshape the plan.
How does the hills and heights, the transition, when heights are going to come over here, does hills capture some of that money that's going in to help supply or support that infrastructure, influx of kids?
So we're going to do the modernization right after that, so then we'd be able to address if there's any impacts based on more kids being on the site for a year. We'll be modernizing right after it, so we would be able to address any negative impact that the school felt. I think that we'll be able to We've been working with the principals, with representatives from the school site, from staff, maintenance, et cetera, to be able to plan for it. I think that we'll be able to adequately get to the year without, really hurting the infrastructure of the school. We also have some older infrastructure that's just going to need to be replaced anyway. So we're sort of at a point where, as we modernize it, right after that relocation process, we'll be able to definitely
Is
address
it like
this.
a forced stress test almost?
Yeah.
See what's needed to really go under the radar?
Well, I think that we are just at a point where your roof and your HVAC have to be replaced anyway. We're going to have to look at how much of the plumbing infrastructure needs to be replaced, and either way, it's going to be part of that modernization, and it just will be replaced. So you're kind of at a point where much of that might be impacted will be replaced through the modernization as far as true infrastructure in the school site.
So how long, I assume that you're going down to studs. Basically taking the roof off, going down to studs to completely replace the plumbing and electrical and things like that. How long do you anticipate that will take?
We are looking at whether there's say, couple of summer projects that can get it done for the most part, or whether there's a need to do something more. I'm hoping to bring an architect on in the next few months so that I could do some initial work with them over the summer and come to you in the fall to be able to start some of that planning work and get input from the community. And they will be the ones who will help me to be able to give more firm answers on that piece. But right now we're looking at, ideally, we're able to do a couple of summer sprints that they have 8 weeks and they can do this part of it. And they have 8 weeks and they can do this, and so they kind of set it up in a couple of phases. If that is not realistic, then we'll be coming back and talking about some planning on what would be realistic and how we address that, and whether it means we need to move students, is there a way to segregate some little part of it that, it's only the PAC that we need for this part of the year. So I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but that's what we're working with architects to help us with planning, and then we'll be able to bring back and talk about it with you just as we did with Delmar Heights.
I have a two-part question. How confident is the district about the Heights rebuild only taking one school year? What happens when it takes longer and they're actually expected to be here for a second year?
No, they're not. And I am very confident that we'll be able to have students back in after one school year. We have intentionally did our RFP process for the lease leaseback builder to find somebody who had done work like this in the past. As we're planning for it, and when we start construction, we're planning for how we can build it in a manner that would allow us to, if something runs behind, it's running behind in, say, the multi-use room. You can have a small segregated part that is finished for a month or so, so we have the overage in a place where we could start school, have kids in seats, and not have to have them off-site for a small period of time. So we're actually have the right team together, and then are doing the planning to ensure that the classroom buildings, the admin building are built first, and the play structure and that stuff is ready so that they can be there. And then if you have to, it actually is set up in a manner that you could segregate and have some end of the multi-use room done, and have them staged sort of in the northwest to be able to handle that.
And then a second part of the question is for the families that are, for the Hills families, when do the parents learn what the plan is for impact for this coming year with the Heights students are here, logistically, like what changes? Classroom changes, I don't know, teacher changes, logistics, parking.
So there won't be classroom or teacher changes that we
In
anticipate.
terms of parents learning like what to expect, so to speak, in detail, not just, there's going to be
Absolutely.
shuttles.
So I think the big piece that we are finalizing now is the being able to have a busing company that could be able to transport students to Ocean Air. We should have that by the end of the month, and then I anticipate coming back out and being able to speak with all 3 sites after that to be able to send information, so that helps with it, but then because that is the key cog to drop off, pick up, etc. for both school sites.
Right. Because right now you can see during drop off or pickup afterwards, there's only one light going out Mango, and everybody's on that light, and there's some parking on the on the side, and it's usually pretty filled. I don't know, 70-80%. But when you have half of another school coming in,
Okay, no problem.
So according to the
Gotcha.
CEQA document, the buses are going to pick up and drop off at Delmar Hills. And the parking for those buses is going to be no parking except buses from 7 to 4. Now, we park along the east side of Mango. That's the primary parent parking for the school. Why are you doing 7 to 4, no parking except the buses? That is a significant impact for the rest of us during the day, anybody coming to volunteer. You're asking volunteers to walk further for no good reason. Because the bus isn't gonna be there at noon or 11 or 2. So is it possible to change that so that it doesn't impact all of the parking? We're gonna have 5 kindergarten classes. All of those kindergarten families are gonna have to park and walk their kid to the door, especially anyone coming from preschool where they're accustomed to a lot more hand-holding and a lot more driving as opposed to, you know, younger kids of older siblings who are used to the elementary school drill. So have you considered 5 classes worth of kindergartners needing to park? Because it doesn't seem like that with this 7 to 4 no parking. Like, how are you trying to mitigate that so that it's not a complete nightmare? Especially with Spanish immersion adding an additional 3, so you've got probably a full class of 22 plus 25 just here, not to mention the 3 classes coming in.
So I've actually heard that request from somebody else as well, and so we will look at it. It may not have to be 7 to 4, and it may be that we can do the buses in the bus turnaround at the site, and maybe we can get them out earlier than school starts. So we're looking at what is the potential with our CEQA document, and then we could potentially not need that level. So we've gotten that input from other community members. We'll follow up with it through the CEQA process, but we'll also follow up with it through the planning process as we get the busing company on board.
Because honestly, adding buses to an already impacted Mango's having a tough time today. So you add 17 seconds to that time at the light, and all of a sudden it goes from really annoying to OMG. So can you add the bus, can you put the buses over by heights? You're gonna have 20 minutes ahead of drop off for the younger kiddo. So doesn't it make sense to get the buses out of the way? You've got plenty of space over by heights where you could potentially do an older kid drop off and then a younger kid drop off at Hills, just clearing out that space. Because having both of them on Mango when it's already impacted today doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so, and those are all potentials. Again, once I have the company that's the expert that can help me with the pickup, we will be exploring more options than just the pickup right in front of Mango.
I just have a clarification. So all of Heights is getting picked up and drop off? The bus pickup and drop offs are at Heights or just half?
It's all
So
at
we have
Hills.
4th through 6th grade students that will have the option of riding a bus, and we are finalizing, we will finalize a pickup location or locations with the company when they're
So
ready.
basically the whole school is those who choose to ride the bus plus K-3 is fine.
If the pickup, if the busing is finalized for this site. I will say also, the buses would necessarily leave here before the full rush starts because they have to get to Oceanair as well. So there would be a little bit less of a impact. It wouldn't be that you would have buses in front of the school or leaving the school at 7:55 when it is the main rush time. So it would have to leave earlier to be able to make it to Oceanair and have them dropped off and be able to start school in time. So that will definitely be offset a little bit too.
Okay, I'm apologizing in advance for this question. Who prepared your CEQA document?
Placeworks.
Okay, so my question is, how much interaction with the county and the city of San Diego have they had? Because everyone's talking about traffic and noise and pollution, which I appreciate, but our roads are pretty terrible in this area, and now you're proposing more buses, more cars on these streets. And so we've been trying to communicate with the county about how bad the roads are, and there's been nothing. So I'm wondering how involved the district is gonna get with that conversation.
So I think from the seeker's perspective, they're involved with the city related to the environmental impacts, but not related to the quality of the streets. It's sort of a separate matter. I think that we've been involved with the city more along the lines of improvements for safe route to school, painting, crosswalks, the light working, those kind of things. But we can certainly reach out with concerns about the
Because
quality.
we've been contacting our board of supervisors about that stuff, and we've gotten nothing. So I was just curious, because that is an added concern too, especially to Mango.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, on that, I got one answer once that we're getting resurfacing soon of the streets, and I posted that link on Nextdoor, so you guys, I can talk to you about it. But so I was hoping today we get more answer or more details on what's happening at the hills, like for like the previous questions on the busing, the schedule, and on additional structures that we're going to put and where and the number.
So
Those things have been shared in the past, but what's the latest?
So I will say that wasn't really the purpose of the meeting. The purpose was to share about the modernization and get input. I will be able to come back. As I kind of shared just a moment ago, the busing is kind of our biggest piece, and we went through an RFP process. We did not have legitimate responses. We went through it again, and we have responses, and we're hoping to be able to approve something to the board. I really need the person who is going to be, or the company that's going to be driving the buses and doing the stops to help me finalize the stops, because we've done some legwork and talking to the Vaughn's Park, so looking at are there other spots that could potentially be used, but we don't have a transportation department. We don't have people who have expertise in where we're doing our red lights and where we can pick kids up in a safe area, and there are actually laws with highway patrol on the visibility for the bus before and after, which I've learned through the interview process. So we are hoping that we have somebody by the end of the month. When we have that, I will have a little bit more information that I can bring together with the information that we've been working on with the school site on location of classes, location of the temporary portables, and we would anticipate being able to bring that back out to you and come talk to you in next month more in depth with more detail.
And the schedule offset. And I'm assuming the Hills students, current Hills students, will stay in the structure. And is it the heights that
Correct.
will go?
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to redirect all the parents that are here, because this is about our future for our modernization with the bond money, and certainly the concerns and questions that you have about with the Heights students coming over next year, we will certainly address those in the next coming months this spring, because we want to make sure all of our families have all of that information. And we've been having lots of community meetings, or not community meetings, sorry, staff meetings to address all of those concerns, and we certainly will inform you. But if you have any questions or anything that you would like to share for input for our future with modernization, this is a really good time to do that. I know Heights is on your mind, but this will be a good time for Chris to hear those.
I do have a suggestion on modernization in terms of hand washing station and bathrooms. I think it would be nice if there's hand washing station outside the bathroom, just kind of along the walls, maybe on each side, with automation, hot water and soap dispensing, as well as inside the bathroom, that, the faucet could be automated. Also to a height where the kindergartners, the little ones, can actually reach. Because first 6 months of school, when they're still yay high, it's hard to turn it on. Sometimes, actually they're pressing.
Yep.
You're pressing it. If they're really hard, they lose some education or something. It doesn't go down. They don't have enough weight. And it's at a level where
for
it's higher.
maintenance too, like we could look at that even before we
Yeah.
Did you just say the hand sanitization, or did you also mention the?
Like hand
So like
washing
hand
station, the faucets.
And then how hard it is to push down on
Yeah,
some
Like
of
maybe
those.
sensor
Yeah. That's,
And we will also, just FYI, we would be including kindergarten restrooms in the community classrooms
Yeah.
as part of the reason, because
that would be awesome.
with the age of the school and the setup, we don't have them, but that would definitely be an addition that we would put in as part of the design, yeah.
And then also in terms of toilet seats height, you know, I know they're like normal standard height, but for kindergartners, they're really like tough to
Mhm.
sit on, and then they're touching everywhere, just,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yep.
That was actually my follow-up, because I remember when I saw the plans, it's probably been 5 years since I've actually looked at the plans, but I thought that there were different, like, they were gonna add bathrooms for kindergartners, and in those original plans, they had talked about how there were gonna be the smaller seats, and then the bigger kids were gonna get normal size stuff, so that was my plan. I was assuming that's still, like, that original plan hasn't been altered as much.
We would definitely, yeah, well, kindergarten restrooms across the district, when we, whether it's retrofit or they're already in there, we'd definitely be doing it at kindergarten size. So size for 5, 6-year-olds, they'd be a little bit lower to the ground, sinks would be easier access, those things, I'm sure.
So that's my follow-up question. Going beyond the next year and moving into 2021, when you're talking about all this stuff and you were saying you're trying for sprints during the 8 weeks of summer, it seems, in my uneducated opinion, that 8 weeks might not be a lot for like a complete modernization like you guys are talking about. So is the plan to break up these modernizations for hills into sprints or steps, and so that the kids are not as disturbed?
That's my initial plan, would be that
Okay.
potentially 2 summers. I know of districts and I know of construction teams that have done 8-week sprints that are $10, $15 million projects. So it may be that they look at it and we could do it all in one summer. It may not be, and then we need to look at phase 1 is this part, and phase 2 is this part. So that's where I need some of that expertise of architects who've done this, a building team that's done this, and I can give sort of my guidance and thinking on this is what I'm looking at. Is this realistic? Is it not realistic? And then we kind of work together to come up with that piece. And then as we go into the planning, we'll set out some sort of a schedule and a plan, and we'll come to you with, because it's not a full rebuild where it's down to the ground, we'll probably come to you with, here are some ideas, because we're going to have some ideas within the kind of constraints of the school, and then we'll get input from you, and we'll kind of come back. So we'll come with, here's sort of our plan for how we do it over a period of time as well, and sort of have some ideas, get input from you, come back to do that process, and then go through the bidding out and design and build it. And so I would anticipate we're able to start some of that process with the Del Mar Hills community next school year, and hopefully early next school year, and we'd be able to do a little bit of work over the summer so that we can kind of have some of those things to bring to you. Yes, sir.
So I guess one input for the future is maybe it's not too late at this point to incorporate elements in all the schools on how to combat, I guess similar to the questions earlier, cleanliness, and the bathrooms will be easier to clean, not much many corners. These kind of details of, I don't know what's the state of the art, but once you have outbreaks like what's happening now, the coronavirus or other, is what are mitigation factors that you can do in the school, maybe to have isolated areas or not, or part of maybe with the nurse office or something like that. So those kind of redesigns with that in mind. So add those elements in the redesigns, even for the heights and other areas as well.
Absolutely. And to one point of that, with keeping them clean, we definitely include our maintenance department as well, and then kind of looking at whether the architects and other districts seeing and kind of next steps with being able to maintain and keep clean. And then I'm hearing you also talking about how kids can clean their hands, those kind of things.
The maintenance department doesn't know about how, for example, if you go to a hospital, the design even of the bathroom is different, right? You have a certain level, and below that, it's easier to clean. There are no corners. It can be. So those things the maintenance department would not know. And so those are things that architects can look up and
Absolutely. And I'm talking about also including them because they put it in action. And so kind of being sure that they know as we make changes how to address and ensure that there's a training component as well to change. So we're keeping that in mind for sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Yes, sir.
So I know that one of the modernization you talk about on the some of the projects for like upgrading offices eating area and so forth. Why are they all delayed back to 8 years?
For the,
You said you have
the front
set-
office and
Yeah, focus on
technology.
that. Front office, eating areas, and some more areas that you mentioned on one of the slides. Why are they backing up to like 2028 and 2029? It's like 8 years from now.
So that's the
No, go
front
back to
office.
one more. What's down there? Yep, right. There. Yep. 28, 29. That's 8 years from now. We won't be here at this school. We'll be in a different school district. We don't know what's gonna happen.
So that's a great piece of input. And that's where there's X number of dollars, and so if those are things that you say, you know what, our front office or our covered dining, those are really big, important things, then that's what I want for Kathy.
That's what we
Because
want.
Then
I mean,
that's
all of
something
it,
that we
right?
can
I mean,
have conversation on. If we're going to do that, what do we not do at this point in time? And how do we shift things around? Because in the end, that's why I'm just trying to be very candid in painting the picture, that I have a lump of money, and we've done some prioritization. And if you see that in this prioritization, we really need this, and you're putting it too late, then let's talk about that. And then that's where, if it's a district-wide need, that facilities roundtable will help me to say, okay, then let's talk about what would we say we need to shift. If it's a site-specific need, then we can talk more site-specific about what is something we need to shift, and we can have that conversation. So that's truly was the purpose of coming out today, is that I can get that input. And so I'm hearing that, is it the covered dining that's the number one? Is it that your front office? What stood out to you?
I think that dining with the cover upgrade for kids
The
is more
shade and
important,
covered dining.
and also the office also too, I believe it.
Yeah, because
So-
our PTA looked into it 2 or 3 years ago, and we were told it was coming. And so we totally stopped even having a conversation about covered
Yeah.
dining. And
Oh.
the same went for field improvements, like we've been talking about field improvements 6 years.
I agree with that being number one.
Yeah.
I can tell you that is on the
I think
cusp,
Holly's
it's already
tired
being
of
planned.
hearing from us about
Yeah.
field improvements. And our
You and Torrey Hills are the first fields to be improved, so we will be taking care of those 2 fields between this coming summer and the summer after.
When you say field improvements, like what's?
We're going to redo the field, and we're looking at doing in our scope. We're working with people to do a scope that would have an underlay that would be, I don't know how far down because I'm not the expert in that, but far enough down that you still have the grass on top, but the gophers and other things hopefully can't get in and out, so we should keep it better. We'd be probably keeping the backstops, but making some improvements to the ball fields you have, and then looking at doing a DG path around it. There'd probably be an ADA necessity of some sort of a walkway down to it as well. So those things combined, with the ADA included, it may be that it's next summer instead of this summer because we're doing some of the planning and it's going to go through DSA, Department of State Architect, but it will definitely be next summer if it's not this summer,
Possibly we need a handball court?
potentially.
So the latest it would be in summer 2021.
Handball courts that we do.
You're saying that's the latest?
The
I really don't.
22.
latest is summer
Or
2021.
you're saying 22 is
21
the
is the
latest?
latest.
21 is the
20
latest.
is the earliest.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
a little leery, and that's why I put 21 on there. If
Okay.
we could get it through, then I would do it this summer, but I didn't want to give false hope and say 2020 when I am confident we will do it 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any chance of reconfiguring how things are built? Like right now, those ball courts are right next to the garden, and the balls are constantly coming in there. The kids are climbing over the fence. They're, hey, can you throw that ball over? And it's just a major disruption.
Well, Kathy,
You're right, Kathy's right with that.
So maybe
I agree.
possibly having a committee, we possibly have some parents on a committee to talk about some of the field.
Get some input on the field and what
And,
we.
because, I mean, a lot of our parents that are here are very involved with that, and Stephanie is a big volunteer and does everything with our garden, so she would have great input too.
And that actually leads to one of my questions was, are there any plans to have students involved in this process? Because I see lots of opportunities for authentic learning. You know, they know the field so well, and they have their strong opinions, they use them every day, as well as the indoor facilities, but especially the fields. They could even do a solar feasibility study, like the fifth and sixth graders.
I definitely was thinking we'd do it in the design. The field seemed like it was a a little more, not necessarily the ball courts and that part, but that just the general field seemed a little more cut and dry too. We need the underlay, you still use them for a number of things. But I will reach out and see if there's some more,
But I think we definitely want to make the field a priority, of course,
Yeah.
but then maybe exploring, because that's a great idea as well.
and if we don't do it this summer, there's maybe a little flexibility too in getting so we were trying to dash to try and get it done this summer. And if it doesn't, I think that then there's even more opportunity to make some tweaks.
As part of the field update, can we please separate the irrigation from the garden? Because when we had broken irrigation on the field, and you shut off all of the water, the plants in the garden started to die. So can we make those separate, please?
Separate irrigation from field and garden, between field and garden.
Can you go back a slide? Sorry.
In terms of getting feedback, would you consider at each side do like a survey? Like here are what you're proposing. What do you think the priority is in terms of, because I mean there's, for parents in this room, but there's 300 families in school. And so I don't know if they can't be here, they can go
Survey as an option.
once you get to a certain point of, okay, you're making close to your final decision, these are the priorities.
Thoughts?
I just, maybe this is more of a question for Andrew too, but I'm assuming like staff has looked at this and given their input as to what they feel is most important as well. I mean, because we may say as parents, like, oh, it's huge, we really need the covered lunchroom, right? Whereas the staff might feel like, well, that's really a low priority.
So that's
So-
the next step, and we'll be getting this spring before we are done. That's part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like we all have our opinions, but I feel like the staff and teachers really.
Yes, and I will be sharing with staff at our upcoming staff meeting just an overview of what was shared today, so that they know, and then they'll have an opportunity to get input as well.
Yeah, because they probably see things we just don't.
Definitely, and I appreciate you saying that. It's funny, each site I've had a parent say, and totally agree. I think that it's how do we get input from all the people who are using the school. In fact, at the last school, they said, just ask the staff. We don't, but you use it too, and you use it for a different way. And so I think it's really important to get those different viewpoints. So thank you.
And our staff definitely knows there's a need on our field, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's like
They would not.
Everybody wants to run out there frequently.
Yeah.
Okay, so as part of this modernization, it doesn't say anywhere about the ingress and egress situation for the hills. And I'm just wondering where in this is that addressed for site modernization?
Okay. I believe we had some thoughts on ingress and egress in our original planning. Will you write that down, Kathy, so we make sure that ingress and egress is part of what we're.
Because I just made the comment, I feel a huge sense of deja vu at this meeting. I feel like I've been at this meeting since I've been here for almost 13 years. So I feel like I was at this meeting 10 years ago. Is that true, Andrew? I feel like we
Well,
had,
I mean, we've been modernized, but we also, we had community nights at the beginning. It wasn't this year, it was last year.
About a year
no,
ago.
it was
Right before-
I remember when I was PTA president meeting with big maps of floor plans of the modern, like
So
I'm sure you've
the old
been
facility,
later.
the old
Yeah, I
facility
feel like-
master plan.
yeah, I
in
feel
like
like this is-
2014.
Yeah, I feel like this is the second or third reimagination.
So
of all
with
of
that, so I think that you're probably thinking back to when we did our original facilities master plan in 2013, 2014, which was to kind of guide what is the work we should do. We then tried to implement pieces of it, but there never was funding to do big picture work. Now we actually do have some funds, and so we've updated the facilities master plan, so some tweaks, but there actually will be work done. And so that's why we want to get the priority, the input, before I go and have conversations with architects and I tell them all the wrong stuff and you guys say that doesn't hit anything that we wanted. So that's where that's perfect because we can include that in those conversations we're having too. I believe we had
There were conversations about just the entry to our school,
the stop signs, you know, all of that, the safety measures that need to happen for the entry to our school. That's not on the modernization conversation here.
And just, I'm sorry, to tag on to that, like, maybe repainting the crosswalks and that sort of thing.
So that's a city thing. We've been working
Okay.
with them to repaint. They had committed to repainting. I forget they did the ones on Heights Road.
Maybe, I mean, just the
Yeah,
ones
the
just
ones at
right
Mango
here,
and
you need like those
Lozano.
nicer ladder kinds, like they have at Sage Canyon. or
Will you write that
something.
down too, Kathy? Because we had a conversation.
Every
I was
time I-
under the impression they were
Or
going
my
to.
daughter to
repaint
Sage
those.
Canyon or one of the newer schools.
No, it's
Oh,
even
these
dangerous at
crosswalks are
night.
nice.
At night it's dangerous. I mean, I know it's not the school's responsibility, but it's still a crosswalk that the
Yeah.
county and the city needs to
Be
be.
nice to have flashing lights.
Yeah.
Flashing lights.
That's the
Brought
city
that
thing,
up.
no.
Yeah.
Option.
Yes.
Yeah, especially with the incoming of more students.
Yeah, right.
Having, because it's awful.
Yeah,
Those
that's my,
stop signs
my
are so
concern is
bad.
actually, you know, this is, the modernization's for 21, but the Heights families will be here next year, and so there's a concern about the safety of all these kids that are now, have been walking to school. There's even more that are gonna wanna walk to school because of the traffic issue. And now I'm kind of sitting here going, I don't know if I want my 7-year-old walking to school, because I'm afraid of all the drivers.
No, I won't even let my dad bring the kids to school because I'm afraid he's gonna run someone over. I can't send him here during that time.
SRO too. I mean, he's gonna, that's our,
I know.
our police officer, but we would go to city council, right, to address those concerns with crosswalk.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone to Barbara Bree's office and we've had conversations and they've done actually a traffic study, was a year ago. And that's why I asked Kathy, because there were some, at least soft commitments to some restriping, so I'll follow up on that piece too.
Are you guys trying to upgrade the fence around the school property? The reason I ask because we've been seeing a lot of snakes in this playground when the kids are playing the summertime, around before summertime. Because I volunteer a lot at school.
Snake fencing?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, you guys can like put a chicken wire around it or something on
There's
the
a
fence
snake
area?
fencing that we've looked at with.
We've been seeing a lot lately.
So, snake
I've
fencing.
seen them.
Will you write down snake
Yeah.
fencing though, Jen?
I think that's like one of the prioritized too because
Yeah, and there's you can even do, like you're saying, there's sort of a snake mesh that you can do. So
yeah,
we'll
like a
look at that
chicken
too.
wire type of.
I think Del Mar Heights has the snake barrier, so I'm curious to know how they thought it worked too. Did it keep out, I mean, I know you can't keep
It's
out.
not completely keep out.
Yeah.
And but I'll follow up with Mr. Swallow too. I need to speak to him, and so I can follow up with him and see.
Just to see what they thought of it. I mean,
But, we can look at that as even if it does something, it's.
yeah, because I know there's no way to keep all of them out wherever we live, but.
And then the last thing is I think like a gopher issue. Gopher holes everywhere.
Yeah, so that's what the redoing the field we're looking at. If we can get some sort of, we're planning on and scoping out some sort of a mesh that should make that much better because they don't have the ability to burrow the burrows they're looking to do. So that's our goal, is to not only redo the field, but have it be good for a long period of time instead of turning back into what you have right now in a matter of a year or two.
Well, I'd like to second the hand washing stations outside, just because the kids are also, the blacktop gets the balls so dirty and gets their hands so dirty, like hand sanitizer outside wouldn't do it. It would just rub it all. They still get it all over their faces, and currently they are sometimes washing their hands in the water bottle fillers, so, so actually having sinks outside.
And just so you know, teachers are really encouraging hand washing, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And the bathrooms, I didn't hear a lot of the call, meeting, but are they gonna put the toilet seat cover things?
I believe, don't we have them in now?
I don't think we have
You
them.
mean
The-
the,
Yeah,
there's no covers in that?
No.
The disposable?
yeah.
Oh,
In the
Yeah.
teachers,
Yeah.
bathroom there.
And the teachers, in the kids' bathrooms, I don't think
I
they're.
will take a look at that.
I can barely get those things out.
Yeah.
Are they?
Get them out?
Are they there?
It was red, but I can't.
I know.
The
Hopefully the first grade.
I will take a look. I think they
I
they
can't
are.
remember.
but
Okay,
I'll-
maybe they are.
And I'll get back to you.
Maybe I'm thinking of the
Yeah.
softball fields.
So, sorry, just come back to the hand washing thing, like, having, like, even like a trough type of hand washing station, like, near the benches where they eat lunch.
Yeah.
Because the kids for sure are not gonna go into the bathroom
No.
before they eat lunch. I mean,
Are you talking about the,
Just having a sink near lunch, so just in general having. I think we're talking
no, I was
about
talking,
even
I
just
was
in the
thinking
wall.
like on the wall, just like a big four.
On the
like,
outside
big
trough,
trough,
like with
hand
four
washing
troughs or
station.
something, yeah.
Yeah.
Right by the
Like
eating
in
area.
Right by where they like.
When they do it in the new age restaurants where it's just
I
like
mean, I
this
know my
big-
kids will never use it.
And
but-
right beside that, a filtered water bottle filling station, so that they can wash their hands, get some water, and have a healthy meal. Underneath shade. Underneath shade. Automatic sunscreen dispenser, stand
Being so innovative.
I wanted to say thank you because
Yes.
I think we're all so caught up in this change to our lives next year with having the two schools here that it's hard to reach out and think of a couple of years down the road. So thank you for circling us back and because we all thought we'd come for something different. So thank you.
So I'm sorry that I didn't get it communicated clearly to you, but I appreciate you taking the time, because I know that that is on your mind. So I do appreciate you being willing to kind of shift and think about it, because this is really good input, and this does help, and this will help as we're thinking about the planning. Before we get into it, before I come back to you, and we will be back, I will be back, not we, I will be back to talk, and we'll have some communication too that I can send out, but we just have a couple of things that I really need to be able to give you the meat of it, and so truly busing is almost the number one kind of cog with all the other things, because they can tell me where we pick up, they can tell me what the times are, and then that will help me to survey the Delmar Heights community to say, would you use it? Because this is what we're thinking for times and locations, and that'll help me to know numbers. And so we have a lot of things that we will be doing over the next couple of months to help us to know how many will be taking the bus, whether they'll take the bus, where we'll take the bus from, and we'll be able to share that with you, and that will help with some of that planning for keeping it safe and physical.
Is there even the potential to pick up the older kids who are going to Ocean Air near the Heights? Is that even?
Maybe.
an option?
Not right by the Heights just because of the construction, but there could be another area somewhere near, and that's where I need there is the potential to look at, is there another spot? But I just need.
Because it seems like if they just never come into this mess. that
I will
could
say
happen.
too, if they're picked up and they leave by 7:40, it's not going to have as much of an impact too, because a lot of our traffic and parking and stuff comes 7:45 to 8, and so kind of looking at that timing, I think, is a big piece of it too. So there are a couple variables.
You also
there.
have to take into account San Vito's bus because they pick up here early, but they're picking up in Carmel Valley an hour later. So you have to make sure that our bus thing doesn't interrupt their bus service too. So there's lots of different factors here. Because I'm thinking about all of our new high school students driving at that time, going by our school, and I'm having nightmares for my children possibly doing so long.
But there have been a lot of staff meetings about next year, and so Chris is really facilitating and putting a lot of thought into everything, and we are getting input from teachers as well, from each of our 3 sites that will be, working with the high students. So we will make sure all of our families know that information.
Because we're looking at it from our side, but we also have to look at it from their side, is a lot of these families have kids that are in 5th and 6th grade that are gonna go to the Ocean Air, and then they're gonna have younger ones here. And so we're also displacing those families that wanna walk their younger kids to school too, or bring them into school. So we have to look at it from all aspects as a district is.
And we're looking at the before school piece of it. Are there things that we can do to make sure that people have a place, and it would be for all Delmar Hills and Delmar Heights, but dropping off a little bit earlier, like we've done the Innovation Center in the past, or things like that that could help to do some release. So we have some ideas, and we're, once we kind of iron out 1 or 2 more things, we'll be able to share some of that, but just know that it is in the works, and we will have some of that for you very soon.
For that meeting, it would be really nice to have kind of a visual of where the portables are going to be and things like that. Also, what's going to happen with aftercare, things like that. Since the students is gonna be
Definitely.
And
We'll be
all
able to
that.
share a bunch about spaces and where things will lay out and help you with seeing that as well.
I just had a thought that perhaps up by Crest Canyon might be a much better drop-off point, simply because there aren't any houses on that side of the street. If you want to do your 7 to 4 parking thing, nobody cares. Down on Mango, it's a disaster. So maybe consider, you're only a couple blocks up, but get out of Mango, and, because we're not the only ones. The people who live on Mango, the people who live in the neighborhood who commute during that time, I guarantee there are people who get out 20 minutes before school simply because they know they're gonna make their commute. So now you're telling them they have to go even earlier. So we're not the only one.
I totally hear the concern, and
Yeah.
it is something we will review.
I think it's probably our number
Absolutely.
one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate you spending an hour with me this morning, and I will be back fairly soon. And I do appreciate the input. We really, it is invaluable and will help us as we're continuing to refine the plan and looking at the next 10 years of construction in the district. So, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's gonna be one of the.
But we were also modernized.
So I'm gonna start doing lots of values.
We were modernized right before I got here.
When I started, the walls were yellow.
I'm gonna,
Well, I was here 12
I'm
years.
gonna help her out with winter tours, and then next year I'll be, I'm not gonna go to Parkville PTA, I'm gonna be to the hospitality. That's like the baby more.
That's very exciting.
Like, having an actual thing where I had to like.
So Stephanie, if we,
If someone
let me
just
get
says,
your way.
I
Think
need
about
you to
wall
draw
and garden, and then you'll
That is,
definitely involved.
that is like,
You know, it's your,
not
it's
stressful
your
for
baby
me.
too.
Like, trying to think of fun ideas, or like ask people to volunteer, that is stressful. Going to a school is not stressful. Now that, does anybody else want some